Hello, and welcome to Jolene Knits a Lot. My name is Jolene, and I knit a lot. This is a video about how I have used files available on the internet to create my own 3D printed circular sock machine. Now, this isn't my first sock machine. My husband, who is very kind and patient, has helped me try out a couple of different models, and this is the sort of version that we feel has worked the best and I've got the best results on. I'm going to take some time to show you all the different pieces needed to create a 3D printed sock machine, and then I'll show you how I put it together. I also plan on doing a couple more videos in this series on how to use this circular sock machine, and then how to turn a tube cranked on a circular sock machine into a sock. So thanks for joining me today, and thanks for your interest in this topic. This has been a little sideline for me and my husband as we've tried different versions of different things to see what worked the best, and this is what we have found. Sir Knits a Lot, as I will be referring to him for this video, recommends that you use a PLA filament on 100% infill. That creates a heavier, denser material that seems to be harder wearing and will last a longer time. We had originally printed this piece on a smaller infill and then had some issues with some cracking. He kindly reprinted it for me, and it's much heavier and denser. So I feel like it will be sort of more of a workhorse for me. All of the files for the pieces that I'm going to show you today will be listed in the description box for this video. I would like to point out that none of these are my own invention. I am using files that have been put on the internet on a website called Thingiverse by amazing and creative makers, and so I absolutely will leave their information, their names, and give them all the credit because all I've done is just put it together. So let's start. This may look like a lot of pieces, and in fact it is quite a few. It takes some time to print all of these pieces to make a 3D printed sock machine. The two pieces that take the most time are this one because of its size, and I'll just show you how it looks here. It is quite a dense piece and it's quite large. So this one takes on our printer about 32 hours, but your experience may vary. And then the cylinder, this piece here, because of its intricacies, this one also takes quite a while to print. I think this one took about 24 hours. So let's get started. I am going to let you know the pieces that you need and also what they do, because I think that would be helpful to me as I was learning how to put together a sock machine. A lot of these files were put on the internet by a creative gentleman who is from Germany, and so he gives them German names, which I will tell you, but I'll also tell you what I call them. I don't know if that's helpful at all, but that's what we're going to do. So the first piece that you need to print, again, is one of the bigger ones. And this is called the Gärhaus, or the casing. This piece holds the cylinder in place. The cylinder sits inside here like this. It sits on some legs that are here. It has a yarn feeder where you put the yarn through to feed the needles and create your knitted tube. And it also has two slots for adjusting the size of the stitches that we're going to be using. So these slots will be used later as we put it together. So this is the base of your sock machine, and it holds everything together. The next piece is the cylinder. Now the cylinder can be made in a variety of different configurations depending on how many needles you want to use. And the number of needles you want to use is dependent on the size of sock you want to make. A lot of the files on the internet are going to be for a 60 stitch cylinder or a 72 stitch cylinder. I've also seen ones for 48 or 80. So it depends on the size that you want to create in terms of your knitted finished sock tube. I think I might recommend you start with a 72. That would make sort of a large woman's sock or a man's sock, depending on the gauge of your tube. But this one that I'm holding in front of you is a 64 stitch. Each of these little ridges will hold one needle, and each needle will represent one stitch. So that's the cylinder. The cylinder sits on this big gear here. The creators on Thingiverse call it the Kegel rod. I call it a bevel gear. I'll show you how it is put together, but this is going to attach to the cylinder here and sit below the casing. And these gears here, which seem rather rigid, are for the crank. These pieces are the referred to as the shiber or a slider in the Thingiverse files. What they do is help adjust the size of your stitch. They sit inside the casing like this. And can be slid up and down to vary the size of the stitch. So the higher up this little V sits, the smaller your stitch, and the lower down it sits, the longer your stitch. The placement of this slider is determined by a screw that goes through this piece here and holds it in place. This piece is called the Schraube or the screw. I'll show you when we're putting it together how this all works. So we need 2 of these sliders and 2 screws to hold them in place. And lastly, to create the 3D printed sock machine, we need a crank. So this is the crank that is going to fit into this bottom piece here. The teeth fit together really nicely and is cranked round and round to turn the machine and create the stitches. This crank sits on the casing and comes with a handle. The handle that I've chosen to print off comes in 2 pieces. So this part sticks out from the side of the gear, and then this small handle can be fitted here with a screw so that it rotates as you spin it. This gear is held onto the casing with a screw and held in place by a small disc. So you'll need one of those. Finally, to support this machine and to allow the knitting to fall through the center of the casing, we have some legs and some supports. So we've printed 3 of these legs, mine are sort of an ombre color, to hold the machine up. They're attached to the casing by these little struts that sit on the top. So we need 3 of each of those. There are 3 braces that sit in between the legs to hold it firm. And finally, the final piece that I've printed is not necessary for building the sock machine, but is very helpful for the actual knitting, and that is a clamp. It looks like this. It's printed in 2 pieces and fitted together. The clamp goes over the knitted fabric that is coming from your machine, goes through here, and allows you to firmly hold the fabric and add weight to it, which allows the stitches to be formed and also to maintain a constant gauge on your knitting. So those are all the pieces required to build a circular sock machine. As I said, it could take you some time to put it together. So be patient. I know it took us a while to sort out which pieces were needed and where they went. I'm hoping that this video will help you in terms of knowing which pieces are required to build the circular sock machine and where they go. These are all the 3D printed pieces that we will need to create this little machine, but there are some other bits and pieces that I'll show you now. Now that we've printed all the pieces that we need for our circular saw machine, we will need some fasteners to put our machine together. The designer of this machine is from Europe, and so many of the fasteners are in metric sizes. I was able to source them from canadabolts.ca, and I will leave a link to this store in the notes below. You'll need 4 M3 35mm screws. This is to fasten the cylinder to the base of the circular saw machine. You'll need 2 M5 bolts with nuts. These ones have a hexy head, and I'll show you that just now. And these bolts are used to fix the sliders into the circular saw machine and allow for adjustment to move them up and down. There are 2 M3 screws that are 12mm long. They're to affix the handle to the crank. The one screw that I have that is not metric is a self-threading screw. It's a 1/4 inch in diameter, and it is 1 inch in length. And this is used to affix the crank to the machine itself. I have one longer bolt for the handle of the crank. I have a spring for a circular saw machine. This spring is it holds in place all of the needles on your circular saw machine, and it can be found from circular saw machine supply stores. But if you don't want to buy yourself a spring like this, you can certainly use a large elastic, and that will work just fine. And finally, I have a Phillips head screwdriver to assemble my machine. And lastly, and possibly most importantly, you're going to need some needles for your saw machine. The needles that I've purchased are the Brother Ribber needles, KR850. And they look like this when they arrived. This is used for a knitting machine, a horizontal knitting machine, that would knit back and forth. And so in order to make these useful for my circular saw machine, I have to cut down the bottom leg so that it looks like this. I just used some metal snips. I should say my husband used some metal snips. And you're going to need as many needles as you have slots in your cylinder. So another way to put that is you're going to need as many needles as you have stitches for your sock. My machine has a 64 slot cylinder, and so I'm going to need at least 64 needles. I find it helpful to have a couple extra on hand, just in case some of them get bent or broken in the process. I haven't broken many needles, but it's just nice to have some extra ones on hand. And those are all the extra materials that you'll need to be able to put together this machine. Now that we have all our fasteners and our pieces made for the 3D printed saw machine, we can start assembling. We're going to start with the casing. This is what all of the pieces of this 3D saw machine tend to be built off of, and so we're going to need that to start. We're going to make the sliders attached to this body in a way that allows them to be adjusted so that you can change the stitch depth on your stitches as you're knitting. I'm going to be using those M5 25mm bolts with their nuts in order to attach them to the machine. If I flip over one of these sliders, you'll see that there's a hexagon shaped hole, just perfect for this nut. So that's going to sit there. And then I'm going to thread one of these bolts through the screw or this adjuster that's going to sit on the outside of that machine. So I'm going to do that for both of these, and then I'll show you how to attach them to the machine. I'm going to take one of these sliders and insert the rectangular section into the rectangular hole on my casing, being careful to hold this little nut in place. Once it's in, I'm going to take one of my bolts that is now on one of these nice little handles and simply screw it into place. I like it to be quite firm so that it's not going to go anywhere while I'm knitting. And as you can see, it is quite firm. And then I can loosen it and slide my little piece up and down as I need to as I'm knitting. So I'm going to go ahead and just tighten that up in sort of a neutral position. And I'm going to do that again on the other side. As you can see, I've attached both of my little sliders to the machine, and they are adjustable. I can slide them up and down as needed. And now I'm going to attach the casing to this lower bevel gear and the cylinder. So you can see the casing does not have any screw holes. It's going to sit over top of the casing just like that. And we're going to take the cylinder and line up those little screw holes to the ones on the bottom piece. I've got my cylinder stacked and lined up with the screw notches on my bevel, which is on the bottom, and the gear house is sitting over top and can rotate around those pieces nicely. So I'm going to use my M3 35mm screws in each of the 4 screw notches to attach these 3 pieces together. There we go. I finished screwing in all of those screws into the holes in the center of the cylinders. You can see that attaches the cylinder to the bottom base and allows the gear house to spin around it freely. The screws that I've used do extend below the body of the knitting machine just a little bit. That won't be a problem because this machine will be sitting on some supports. I'm going to set that aside right now, and we will get the crank and the handle set up. In order to turn this machine, we need a crank, and we have a small handle here that's printed in 2 pieces that allows this handle to spin freely as we spin the crank. So the first thing we're going to do is attach this flat part of the handle to the gear. Flip it over, and you'll notice that one side has got quite a bit of texture and a ridge where those teeth for the gear are, and the other side is quite flat. We're going to be putting the handle on the flat side. It's going to stick out a little bit from the side of the handle just like this, and we're going to use 2 M3 12mm screws in these little holes here to attach this part of the handle to the gear. So what I've done is use my screwdriver to set up the 2 little M3 12mm screws into the base of the handle. I'll just line them up with the holes on the crank and screw them in. Great. Now we'll use that large bolt that we had with the nut. So we'll put the bolt down through the crank handle and then through the hole and attach with the nut. If you'd like, you can use some washers to fill in this space a little bit, or just screw it right on. We're nearly there. Now we're going to put the gear onto the circular sock machine casing, and that will allow us to turn this gear, which will spin the bottom, and power our circular sock machine. So we'll take our handle facing out, and we will place it on the knob that is sticking out on our circular sock machine. This may be a little bit fitted. You may need to use some force to get that gear to fit on. And now we're going to use our self-threading screw that I've actually already screwed through this disc. We're going to place it in this hole here. So we'll place it in, and then we'll go ahead and screw that in with our Phillips head screwdriver. It's now time to put together the supports for our circular sock machine. I've printed out 3 legs. Each leg has 2 notches on it. These notches fit into the supports that go in between each leg. So let's put those on now. You'll see that the supports, or the struts, or whatever you want to call them, do have notches. I put the notches facing down to create a firm support for a sock machine. We've now built the base of our support for the circular sock machine, but the circular sock machine doesn't reach the legs. We're going to use the extenders to help it reach. So these are the extenders, and we put one in each of the holes around the circular sock machine casing. And once they're in, we fit those on the legs of the support. And there we have it, a 3D printed sock machine. Our circular sock machine has been built, and all we need to do is add some needles so that this machine can do its work. So the first thing we're going to do is add our spring or elastic to the machine so that we can insert the needles. This spring or elastic is going to help the needles stay in place as they move up and down in their slots. It sits in this ridge right here, and this one's a little bit loose, but that's okay. It's just there to help make sure that the needles stay where we want them. Now all my needles have been cut down to size by my lovely husband, Sir Knits a Lot. They all look like this. And we're going to be setting them into the machine, into each slot. I like to insert them with the sort of foot of them down and then slide them into place. So I place it like this down, I tip it up, and it slides into place. You'll find that you'll have to rotate your machine in order to get all the needles in place. And you'll just go like this all the way around your machine until you have all your needles inserted. All right, that's it. We've got all the needles in place, and now our machine is ready to use. You'll notice that some of these needles are higher up. That allows the needle to come up, catch the yarn that's coming through this yarn feeder, and then go down through the loop of yarn and create a stitch. The height of this is determined by the shape of the casing itself. And how far down the needles go is driven by those sliders that we inserted into the machine. And they can slide up and down to adjust the depth that the needles go, which in turn creates a longer stitch if the sliders are down, or a smaller stitch if the sliders are up. And that, my friends, is how I put together my circular sock machine printed on my 3D printer. I hope that you give this project a try. You will need some patience and some materials, but I've really enjoyed knitting on my circular sock machines, and I hope that you enjoy knitting on yours. Thanks for joining me for this video of watching me assemble and print a 3D printed sock machine. I look forward to putting together some more videos for you on how to use this 3D printed sock machine, and then how to turn the tubes that this machine will make into socks for you and your friends and family. My name is Jolene. This is Jolene Knits a Lot. If you like this video, please like and subscribe to my channel for more knitting content. Thank you.